Good morning, Russ. I'm Sharita. Good morning.
Hello, all.
Colin just sent the agenda this morning. I just forwarded to everyone. So check your email probably about
I,
5 minutes ago.
I saw it. Thanks so much.
Okay, and the only excused absence we have that I know of is Jason Brenner.
Anthony.
Good morning, everyone. We apologize for the delay this morning, but Zoom is apparently making us all update as we go in. So I see people continuing to trickle
Anthony, did we find out about COC liaison?
No.
If there is anyone currently in the meeting who knows if they hold a status called COC liaison to policy and planning, can you please identify yourself? Because Anthony and I were talking this morning, we're just trying to get a clear number. We've had some new members join policy and planning, so we just want to make sure that we have an accurate count of who the voting members are in the event we have to do any kind of votes in this meeting. And then if we don't have any COC liaisons, we need to get some.
Sorry, Shrita. I think that's me.
Yeah, I think Sharita, going back to exec meetings last year, I think of the names here, it's Drew definitely.
I want to say yes.
I think Tasha, but I can't remember from the minutes if that was ever like formalized.
I think I remember us like having at least two people, and we said we were going to take both. But I can't remember who the second person was, and I thought Drew was one of them. I was trying to go back and see if I could find it.
I'll go see if I still have those minutes. I may have done a purge when I was done.
I started awkwardly in July when we weren't meeting because that's the 1 month HSAC just doesn't meet. And then I think I had an excused absence in August. So it was a bit of a bumpy start, or just an irregular start, I should say.
And then I think our agreement, if our HSAC membership and policy and planning increases, because we haven't updated that, right, Russ?
Well, that was why I asked about a month ago if I needed to be formally approved to come over to this committee, because that would affect the number of people you could have on that were COC liaisons. And I don't think that officially did happen, so.
No, it didn't officially happen because I thought as an HSAC member, we encourage HSAC members to join a committee. So we just need to know that you're on the roster, but I don't think we have to like approve it. But once that number grows, then we need more COC liaisons under our current guidelines.
Well, we can have more. We don't have to have them.
We don't have to have more, but we can have more.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to see, are we even in compliance with the minimum? Or do we need to be seeking out other people to formally join? Sally? Was Sally one of them?
I don't.
She is not currently, no.
Yeah, we probably need to go back because being a COC rep, like to the HSAC is one thing, being a COC liaison to a committee is another.
We have to go back and let our team go back and look at where we are. At one point, we were out of compliance due to folks who were on the committee but not really showing up, and who were who were in transition of coming off of HSAC. So we just need to look and see. We might be back to where we should have been, but we did not ask any COC liaisons to exit the committee when we had fewer HSAC members.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, between me, Samantha, Colleen, Ebony. I mean, yeah, you can have lots of liaisons on here.
You get one liaison for every 3 HSAC members. Two-thirds of your.
I thought it was 2 liaisons per HSAC member.
Yeah, 2/3. Sorry. Yes, you're right.
Is there a way to become an official member? Because I have just started coming to the meetings, and I don't know if I need to become an official member to allow for more COC liaisons, but if anyone lets me know, I will do any paperwork associated with that.
No paperwork. Since
Okay.
you're an HSAC member, you just have to say, I want to be an official member of the committee.
Okay, great. I'll send an email or something
Well, I
then.
think
I
we
want to
had
be
you
a
listed,
member.
Samantha, I think we had you listed because we knew you were HSAC member.
Okay,
So I
okay,
think,
great, great.
but we still need to like make sure that we write that stuff down so that we know and make sure that we honor our current obligations for COC liaisons to be voting members of policy and planning. So we're just trying to get our ducks in a row and make sure we're not out of compliance.
Great.
I think we are we there? Are we at quorum?
Need one more. So we
Well,
have,
Jason being excused, does he count?
I'm not sure, I don't think so. Samantha was 1, 2, 3. We have 6.
So we need one more person.
Yeah. Either Heidi. Okay, well, we have another person. There's Alicia.
Here's Alicia.
So we have quorum now.
All right, great.
Okay.
I will officially call our meeting into order. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for your attendance today. Thanks for joining in the discussion prior to the meeting, just for us to get our ducks in a row about compliance and membership and numbers. The next item on our agenda is approval of our minutes. And so, Anthony, did we get them out yet or no?
No, we did not. I wanted to go through this list and make sure we had everybody, but for the record, we have been able to draft all of the outstanding minutes with the exception of June. They have been shared with Colin and Sharita, albeit late last night, early this morning. So as soon as we clarify this list, which I think we just did, we will get those out to everybody, but it will be after this meeting. So, there's a batch of minutes that need to be approved, including June, August, September, and October. So, you all can decide how you want to do it. I think it's sort of important to approve minutes at a meeting so that you can have whatever discussions you need to have. We could try and do it as an email vote, but it would get kind of crazy with, any corrections and stuff like that. So, but minutes are available and in the hands of the chair for the past 3 meetings.
Does anybody have any questions, glaring concerns about us postponing approval of the minutes until our next meeting, or whether we need to send them out for vote and correction? And if so, like, how do we do that just to minimize confusion? I definitely feel like we need to go through and review the minutes. Because I try to, oftentimes I use the minutes to help me remember what we need to pull forward for continued conversations. And I just want to make sure we're not missing anything or letting anything go by the wayside, that we kind of at least, come to some kind of agreement before the discussion just abruptly stops. So, is anybody glaringly not happy with the idea of getting minutes and approving them in our next meeting, or want them before? I see a thumbs up by Russ. And crickets otherwise. Okay, so I'm gonna assume, because I don't have anybody objecting to the thumbs up, that we're going to postpone review of the minutes for our December meeting, which means we need to get everything out. Everybody needs to commit to reading those minutes and getting and being ready to move forward with a vote, because if we keep on, we're gonna have 6 months worth of minutes, and we're really close to that right now. So I will move on to item 3 on our agenda. That's our unsheltered numbers update. Colin, are you prepared to do it, or is Nicole here?
I've got them.
Okay. Yeah, I have them as well. So
Give me a second here. I did have them here. Hold on. We're at 50 unsheltered families, 86 unsheltered singles, 30 families at risk, 39 singles at risk, And last week, one family moved in, 3 females moved in, and 11 males moved in. There were 7 immediate callbacks after exiting shelter, 4 from rescue mission, 7 from other counties.
Hold
And
on, the seven includes the 4 or no?
those are separate.
Okay.
I'll copy and paste this into the chat. And 1 travel diversion.
I think I'm a little speechless. Um,
Lots of family.
I don't know how we get out of this place, but I don't like it here. Um, do we have any so right now, just looking at this, potentially we have the potential tsunami of 80 families being homeless if those 30 people don't find other means to stay housed. That's like, I think that's a lot of people. And that is a huge jump from us having 25 and now, 25, 28 going to 50 and 30. And I just need you guys to just keep looking at that and allowing that to motivate you and us to hasten our advocacy efforts, our requests, our asks, to help stop the bleeding in our continuum, as it looks like our numbers are skyrocketing at an alarming rate. And I think I went back and I looked at maybe like the last 6 months of numbers from Nicole, and I was specifically paying attention to how many families we were turning over. And it was like, based on this number today, I think we're like at 5. That's how many families we've been able to take into a shelter space in the last since August. And the number continues to grow. So I just think that we just need to keep these numbers in mind as we move forward in all the efforts and energy around homelessness and housing advocacy needs and rights for folks in our city. Anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments other than me?
We do have a space in today's agenda, Sharita, to talk about recommendations for budget requests. And some of that can be talked about during that part of the agenda.
Right. And that's actually where we're moving to right now.
Yep.
So that was like the perfect segue into this conversation about budget requests to city and county officials in the coming year. And we need to be mindful of the priorities from our polls on our last meeting. So those 4 items that got the most or the highest votes were diversion capacity, maximizing our current emergency shelter beds, and increasing emergency shelter beds, to include the A, B, and C tie of safe parking and pallet homes, which I think we had some conversation about, more shelter, and of course we have a tent policy in creation right now, and tents are not being put out. I actually have a tenant I have a patient that I'm working with that is anti-coordinated entry or street outreach, sleeping under tarps outside. And I worry every single day whether I'm going to see him alive. Day center services and street outreach. So I will entertain conversations about budget requests, ask, and kind of any kinds of ideas that come up for you as it relates to how we ask for what we need to help some of the most vulnerable people in our city.
There's also a couple of hands up.
Oh, I can't see him. Wait a minute.
Ricky, Tasha, and Drew, I believe.
I don't know what order you were in. I see you now. Ricky, can Can I defer to you last and let Tasha and Drew have the floor first? Is that okay, Ricky?
Yeah.
Okay. And Tasha and Drew, you guys feel um Tasha, yeah, go ahead, Tasha.
Thank you, Tarita. This is for the conversation we're having now, but also the numbers entering the system. I raised a concern with the number of families coming to the system. I was startled today when I read those numbers, but I do want to raise the concern that as we're discussing entry strategy, I would like for us to also consider the exit strategy. We're not moving families out of our shelter fast enough. I'm not sure if other shelter providers are having the same struggle we are, but right now we are at a standstill. Even self-resolve. I've been conversing with folks at the city, community development, with public housing options. But even with our rapid rehousing support, and I think Housing for New Hope and our program, we're doing the best we can. We are getting a lot of families with arrears and evictions, and it's just stalling the system. So as we're bringing families into the system, we also need to discuss an exit strategy because we're literally at a standstill right now. I don't have anyone imminently planning to move at this time.
Thank you, Tasha.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to chime in on Tasha's comments before I move over to Drew?
If I could ask a question about
Mm-hmm.
to Tasha, are you having success with the landlord engagement as far as landlord initiative as far as getting landlords for any clients?
Yes, primarily those coming through the rapid rehousing program. They're doing great. I don't know why I'm blanking on her name, but she's phenomenal. She and Tanya Courtney. They've been working well together. But it's not enough. Unfortunately, it's not enough.
Okay.
So I think you just highlighted something around the not enough. I do have more questions, Tasha, about the not enough, and I want to give Drew just the opportunity to share, and then Ricky, and then I want to come back to the not enough because I want us to kind of think about what not enough, like operationalize and identify what the not enough is. Drew.
I'm actually going to go to Ricky first. She had her hand up.
Okay. All right. Well, Ricky, take the floor.
Drew, chivalry is not dead. Thank you. So Sharita, this comment goes back a little bit ago as we were, looking at the numbers that Colin presented. And a question that I have is anyone on this call from UMD? And does it make sense that members from our shelter community, both UMD and FMF, are part of policy and planning as we think about exit strategy? And do we know if the family rooms at UMD are full, or do they have the capacity to allow additional people in? Thank you.
Great question, Ricky. To my knowledge, the rooms are being used, but in a prior meeting, Nicole Lamb did tell us that oftentimes people would opt not to take the UMD rooms because they know that UMD is a 30-day shelter, and they would rather rate for Tasha's program because it's not identified as a 30-day shelter, or they at least know people can stay longer than 30 days. So I don't know if that has anything to do with Tasha's program having the more difficult to serve because they have an abundance of things behind the lack of housing, like arrears and evictions and things like that, or what that is. And I think you raised a great point about UMD or somebody representing the shelter, all of our shelters being at the table and being a part of these discussions. So thank you very much. And unless community development would like to do so, I will reach out to somebody with UMD and make an appeal for somebody to be present in these meetings.
I will say this, their family rooms are full, but that is the challenge, is the community's knowledge that it's a 30-day shelter. And there's still some confusion around that, or at least not some clarity in the community that time can be extended. It's just that you have to be meeting particular goals, which really right now are defined but not clear. So I think we're going to have to work on messaging as well as to what they're doing, and making sure that there's some consistency and that we have objective guidelines that they're using, not so much subjective, but being able to clearly define what a housing plan is, what it constitutes, and what a family has to do in order to stay there longer. So if we can get some messaging out, I think maybe we can hopefully alleviate some of that.
Thanks so much for that, Jeffrey. I see Drew's hand, and I'm trying to. Okay, thanks, Ebony, for saying that you will communicate and share that with families. We appreciate that so much. Drew, you have the floor.
Thanks, Rita. My question or just comment was similar to Ricky's, about UMD being a part of this conversation. And I think just broadly, I remember there was a conversation, I think it was a couple of years ago at this point, just about like reporting out project status and outcomes. I know I believe, and please someone step in and correct me if I'm wrong, that performance management evaluates COC funded programs. And so what other projects are then being evaluated and reported out on? And I think that would be particularly helpful as we're approaching this prioritization period. So like, for example, the designated housing funds, all those projects that are coming up for renewal, White Flag, that's the one that Open Table does, like, would it be helpful for us to share out, here's what we've done for this last contract, so that coming up, folks can just make those decisions with what the capacity is or what has been done in the past. I think that is my biggest question around a number of projects. Again, those that are going through performance management, it's fairly straightforward. There's a clear process for that. I guess my question, kind of piggybacking on Ricky's comments, would be like, in addition to the family rooms, what is UMD's other capacity like? And that's a reaction to hearing about the prioritization, saying that we need additional shelter beds. Like, well, what is being utilized and like what is the capacity currently? And I just hear different things from different folks at different times, and I feel like that transparency piece isn't there. And so like, if we're just in a habit of reporting out with different projects from different funding streams, that could be helpful, so that we're not kind of scrambling at like when it comes time to prioritize for the next budget season. So I can dig through my emails and see when that last was. I think that was like Hanalei that sent that out, so I'm dating myself that it's been a couple of years, but I think that could just be helpful for, again, projects that aren't going through performance management.
Thanks so much, Drew. I think I would also be interested in, so if I'm understanding correctly, and Jeffrey, maybe you are the person that I need to direct this question to. When folks are with a single or families in any of our shelters, is the sole ways that they get out of shelter, are they relying either on the person self-resolving, getting referred to rapid rehousing, housing them, or getting identified for PSH and them going into a PSH project? Are there other efforts from the case managers to help people resolve or access other housing avenues independent of our rapid rehousing and PSH projects or street outreach, picking folks up and housing them? Do we look at whether there are efforts around them? I know that folks who are very medically fragile, they usually get quickly diverted to us here at the clinic for us to work on a housing plan for them, because oftentimes those people need assisted living facilities and things like that. But I'm just wondering, are the case managers also like themselves working other avenues to help people get to housing?
They're supposed to. For the housing search is not to be limited to funded options. There's supposed to be some additional effort, and right now we've been doing TA, but we have kind of stalled right now because of all of the other things, and of course we're at the end of the year, end of the HUD year, so that's kind of paused our TA. But part of TA with not just them but system wide is to make sure that we have some uniform case management. I've given instruction very recently that anyone who comes in should be given the option, all of the options that we have in the system, but the external options as well, like HCVs and applying for public housing. We know that that's a little slower, but if you get into rapid rehousing or get into PSH and you've already done an application for those other options, then you're a little bit ahead of the game. Also, there's supposed to be some efforts to secure housing for the one-time assist. I know we're down on money, but the direction is there to try for all those options.
But that's not really something that we track or pay attention to. Is that correct in saying,
We
Jeffrey?
have not been in the past. We are now. We're making sure that the direction is there and that it's verifiable. Whenever compliance goes out, they'll be looking for the housing search. They'll be looking to make sure that the notes are there. When we have our by name list meeting, I'm myself and Nicole we're in the notes and we're looking to make sure that that there's some efforts around that, because oftentimes when we call someone for a referral for rapid housing, they've already been exited, and we have to try and track them down because they were in shelter with a referral, but then whenever they come up for the referral, they're already gone. So we're working on some efforts now to try and do that. And again, the pause was the end of the year. Everybody was doing reporting. Everybody was getting their applications together for the upcoming fiscal year. So that has paused, but our intention is to, prior to year's end, getting back into that and going
Okay,
for
so
uniformity.
thanks so much, Jeffrey. So I do want to circle back to Tasha about the not enough. And I'm hoping that from just the discussions we've had just now as it relates to budget requests, then maybe we can be putting forth some budget things that we feel like will help us navigate some of the things I think we've highlighted. But Tasha, are you ready to elaborate, madam?
Yes. So when I say not enough, in speaking to what Jeffrey just mentioned with the housing plan, the struggle that we have been having, I've already mentioned it. It's not that our system is not working well. We don't have a response for the number of households entering the system with high amount of arrears, debt, and evictions on their records. And that's what's stalling us. So when we lost the emergency housing vouchers, there were several families in line for that. That went away. And we had no plan. And that was months in the works. And then we had to quickly pivot, and some of those families lost housing or had to be exited from our shelter with no response. And then we're hoping for HCVs, which we're getting more families with disabilities and they're receiving SSI benefits. They can't work, and we have no response for that. So we have those families in shelter where we don't want to put them back out on the street, so they stay longer here. The debt, we have no response for. Even when they secure employment, it's at such a high rate that it's taking us time to help them pay down the debt, that if we had, assistance like we've had before, that could potentially help landlords feel comfortable renting to those families. We have more families with chronicity and diagnosed disabilities that would be eligible for PSH, but there aren't enough slots for those families. So we're hoping they can self-resolve, but they don't have enough income to self-resolve. It's not enough. We're trying everything, and I'm grateful to hear that there are conversations taking place with public housing and Durham Housing Authority, but those waiting lists are so long at this point. So I would welcome suggestions, and self-resolving. We're trying every angle. That's not a viable solution for our families right now.
Thank you very much, Tasha. Do folks feel like we have discussed the things we highlighted and identified as priorities and had and shared enough in conversation for us to go forward with thinking about funding requests that we should be asking of city and county government? And don't be so quiet. We got all these people. I'm looking forward to robust conversations on what we think we can do.
Well, I have my hand raised, but I don't know if you're able
Go.
to see it.
Look, I keep moving my picture, and you're like the first person on the screen. So when I move down, then you go away. So go ahead, Ricky.
Okay. So no, I think this conversation is super helpful in how we next look at the 4 priorities. Because as Tasha was explaining the situation with the families that they are serving, my mind was in overdrive of like, how could we have it so that, diversion is able to provide arrears, right? For families that may be going through her rapid rehousing program where arrears aren't an eligible expense. Like, is there a way that we can make our system run in an interconnected way where we're able to strategically utilize our flexible funds for program participants in, federal programs that have very strict allowable expenses. And so as number 1 on the list was increase the capacity for diversion, I was like, oh my gosh, if there were money available to meet some of those arrear expenses for someone who's going through a rapid rehousing program where arrears are not an eligible expense, like that would be awesome. Okay, I'm turning off my mic now and lowering my hand.
Thank you, Ricky. Anybody else? Angela, I know that you are a part of LEAD. I don't know what discussions you've been having in your groups. Do you have anything you want to add to this discussion?
I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of an intake.
All righty, thank
All right,
you.
sorry. Hey, Angela.
Ebony,
I knew you were coming this way. I'm listening. I don't know at the moment, but I'm thinking.
Colin, like, what do you think the timeline for our ask, like, to be timely? How much time do we have?
We put it on the agenda now. So in the last couple of years, we've been, I don't want to say late, but probably later than we should have been. In an ideal world, we definitely would like to have some decisions made and stuff from HSAC going to city and county probably in December. January might be as late as we'd push it, but in the past, it's been kind of March, April, February, March, which is really, really late in the system and the season. So I think the sooner we can come up with some stuff, the better. Like it's been shared today. It's the items that we prioritized in the last meeting don't line up 100% with the needs that we're talking about today. We can help people all day long who are unsheltered, which is kind of what got prioritized in the last meeting. But if all we do is help people who are unsheltered, we're not putting in that subsidy and the supportive services that's needed to exit people. So I think you kind of need to look at saying, okay, we need money on the front end to help people who are unsheltered be able to navigate and get connected to resources, housing search. But then if we don't have ongoing subsidies, financial assistance, supportive services, then all we're going to do is keep having the same problem we have. And the system will just continue to be backlogged as we don't have turnover in permanent supportive housing. People in rapid rehousing are there for longer and longer periods of time. So we really have to be thinking through what is it needed in the long term and what can we do system-wide to build out employment opportunities or other ways to increase household income so those subsidies will become less and less over time and ideally not needed. But, otherwise you're going to build a system where subsidies are needed in perpetuity for everyone, then it becomes almost an entitlement and then it becomes an unsustainable program because the amount of subsidy over time becomes greater and greater and becomes more difficult to meet the needs. And if the amounts of money don't increase substantially on an annual basis, the number of people you can serve with a flat funding becomes less and less over time due to cost escalations. I don't know if that helps at all.
No, I mean, I just think we're in this very difficult place. We're trying to figure out what group is in need the most for support. And I think the challenge at the same time is that we've been in that mode for so long, we've ignored all these other groups. And now we have like monsters with those groups that seem very difficult, or, challenges that are very difficult to address and resolve because we have kind of prioritized, unsheltered, most vulnerable group. And I think, we're missing out on opportunities to get some people housed very quickly who just need a light touch because of the way we've created things. So it's almost like we need to have, in my mind, some like a 3-tier kind of way of addressing more than one group, or having services and resources available for, the 3 subsets of people that we're serving: folks in shelter, folks unsheltered, and light touch, low barrier people we can resolve really quickly. And we have to figure out how to do that. And we can't just look at one group anymore because we're actually creating a bigger one group because we let people stay homeless for a long time and then all hell breaks loose in their life, right? So we have to have like this 3-pronged approach in my mind. And so like diversion keeps coming up. It's come up in the last 2 HSAC meetings. I definitely think that's an area where we really need to look at some increase for diversion assistance. But I'm just like thinking out of what Tasha said, and she talked about landlord engagement and rapid rehousing providers doing the best they can and people working really hard, but it's not being enough. And so like I remember once upon a time when I first started doing this work here in Durham is when DHA was doing their big administrative review and update on their policies, and we kind of like got them to agree to reduce some of the term limits on how long they would count somebody's criminal record against them, and different things like that. So it makes me think like, how can we expand our landlord engagement to maybe use some of those tools and tactics that we use in the public housing world with a couple of property managers that are willing to work with us, to take a chance on people they wouldn't otherwise take a chance on, with the understanding that those people are going to have supportive services, some financial assistance and things like that. Like how can we bring more compassionate housing providers into the fold to help us transition maybe some of those people out who might have a criminal record where they, not a criminal record, some adverse credit things that are too big for them to resolve, but would we be willing to partner with the continuum and the service providers to give that person the opportunity to be housed? Like, we got to think outside the box, and we got to try to use the things that worked with us in the past that help people move along to inform a new group of housing providers or a new housing market to just take some chances with us that they wouldn't otherwise do. Like, those are the things that are like standing out in my mind, because 50 families is 28 families was unacceptable. I don't even know if it's a word for 50 families. It's not a word. It's like terrible. But we really have to figure it out. And I think we've also adopted some things in the past that we haven't done a really good job at utilizing, which I actually have it listed under number 5, our last topic of discussion. And it's about like strategies and things. Like, we talked about move on strategies and things like that in the past. We've talked about shared housing. I've yet to see us do a shared housing anything. Looking at those not so common ways of helping people resolve. Is that 2 leases? Because the unit's it's a 2-bedroom available, and you need to house 2 singles, and we could get that landlord to allow us to have 2 separate leases for the 2 rooms. Like, what things can we do to expand and utilize models nationally that have been proven to work in our community to address some of our housing challenges? So,
Really, if I could interject right there, I just went and looked at a place within the last couple of weeks. That is a very large house, and we are considering just those type of things. They are successful nationwide, and we've tapped it a little bit. Tasha, I think you've talked with them as well, and so we're looking to see how we can make these things happen. I think with this particular one, I think it's probably going to be better for singles.
right.
There is an option of possibly doing two families, but it's not really. I don't think it would work as well with that. So that is something that we're looking at. It's also something that we want to get with Housing for New Hope, with the landlord group, to be looking for those type of situations, and to in case conferencing, we'll be looking at those options directly and seeing what families can we pair, what families will allow themselves to be paired, and kind of letting them choose.
Sorry to interject, and I know Shrita, at times you haven't been able to see hands raised. I saw Russ had his hand up, and I just wanted to point that out before the conversation moved in another direction.
Yeah, thanks, Drew, because I didn't see you, Russ. You might have to say Sharita or something like that. If I don't see it, I'm not ignoring you. You have the floor, Russ.
Well, I guess, like, it's a 2-parter. We got to have a plan. We got to have a plan. We got to have a plan. And we got to have some focus. And I guess, because we are experts at naming the issues, and then grabbing a little bit of I really feel like the whole shared housing conversation that Lloyd brought to us 2 or 3 years ago is a perfect example. It was kind of discussed. I think I'm going to oversimplify. I think somebody went to a conference or heard a webinar. It was COVID, so maybe they didn't go. And then we kind of got excited about it for a hot minute, but we hadn't had a lot of conversation about what implementation would look like. And we didn't have a lot of takers. And when we tried to roll it, people just weren't interested. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. I'm not saying it doesn't work other places, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, it feels like we're in a moment where we need 2 tracks. Like, we have got to get a plan, because we have a perfectly designed system to get the exact results we're getting right now. That's, you've heard that phrase from other people. So we've got to find a way to get a real plan, long-term, that is data-driven and well-informed otherwise. But I'm wondering if in the immediate moment, it's hard for us to group solve these things in these conversations. I feel like with the growth and expertise for the lead agency, is there a point where we can look and say, look, here's something that's a real concern to this group. We'd really like a couple options brought back that you all have fleshed out based on the data that we can help refine, and then look at, if we need to advocate. Because my understanding is that the A and HSAC on, advisory is not to advise the lead agency. The lead agency is to carry out what the HSAC says needs to get done and what HUD says needs to get done. Our job, the A and HSAC, is for us to be advising council and the commissioners. and probably at sometimes wandered over there toward DHA with some concerns. And some probably advocacy is the A in that situation. So I just don't know if there's a way for us to try and run this on two tracks where we really do start looking in earnest at what long-term plans, long-term governance restructure looks like to get us different results. And then are there some things that the lead agency could bring back to us pretty quickly, fairly baked, maybe not fully baked, so that are aligned with some of these concerns that could be looked at. Because it's just so hard for us to try and solve things in committee this way.
This is what we need to have. We need to do the work to try to get to some kind of resolution. I mean, and I know that you have kind of like really pushed for us to have a strategic plan. And I think, while I can't speak for everybody else, I think it's great for us to have a forward-looking plan. I was a member of this whole continuum when it was the 10-year plan to end homelessness, and it had been going on for more than 10 years. It's funny. Um, But I also know that strategic planning takes time. You have to logistically operationalize it. Then you have to get somebody to run what you have identified that you want them to look at. Then the data, retrieving information, that process has to take place. Then it has to be synthesized and delivered to this report. And it could be 2 to 4 years for us to get that. And the problem is we don't have 2 to 4 years to help stop the bleeding what we're seeing in our community. And I think that's why Colin is asking us, what do we feel like for funding and what we can do now? What do we think, are the best as to make at this point? While I do understand and agree that strategic planning is important, we also have to presently look at what we're doing, because I know I'm getting creamed. I would imagine that Housing for New Hope, just because you got housing in your name, I can't even imagine how many calls you get every day of people requesting, asking for help, and being in need. And the economy continues to get, the housing market continues to get worse, and costs continue to increase, and people's earning potential is not growing at the rate. So I can just only imagine that, if you just had somebody fielding phone calls, what that even looks like. You know what I mean?
But
So
Shrita, that's why I'm saying two tracks. I mean, it's almost, so I've been watching all these Buncombe County emergency management things because of impacted family about Helene and Buncombe and Asheville. And they're managing to deal with the immediate crisis and getting people food and getting people drinkable water, and looking at this is going to be a 5 to 10 year rebuilding process. You know what I mean? I mean, some people can do the walking and some people can be prepping for the running.
So are you saying in what you're bringing to the forefront is some funding asked to do the strategic planning work? Is that what you're asking for? Or suggesting, recommending, like?
Yeah, I mean, I've already said that's fine. I mean, I just think if we keep sitting in meetings circling on what's challenging, it just burns people's energy down, without some structure that gets us to a conversation of what can be done. And I agree. I mean, plans can take a long time. We just feel like we got to figure out how to run two tracks,
So
like a long-term plan, and then let's get some things that we can knock out in 6 to 12 months that are on the near horizon.
So if I may, thank you, Russ. I think you said exactly what I think we're trying to request as the lead agency is a little bit of guidance, because every time we come to a meeting, there's a new priority and a new idea that needs to be fleshed out. And we never get time to fully flesh out and tease out, does this work? Could it work? How would it work? What would the cost be? Before it's like, oh, wait, here's the next problem. It's sort of, we as the lead agency can definitely do the data analysis, come back with recommendations. We're trying to get some idea of where do you want us to focus our energies in the short time, so that we can come back and say, oh, if we do X, we can help this in the short term. And if we do Y, we can do this in a medium term while we're working on this larger conceptual plan. The challenge for us at the lead agency is every time we come in, it's this, or it's this, or it's this. It's like we need That's why we tried to narrow down, here were the priorities that we decided on last month. Now we're like, okay, we know this is the priorities, but when you look at the priorities we came up with, those are the priorities for people who are unsheltered. Okay, if we only look at that, we're going to have a problem because there won't be that exit strategy where we need to come back and say, we need an exit place. And what I'm hearing today is an overwhelming need that to exit people from housing, there needs to be subsidy. And that subsidy could be local dollars, it could be public housing, it could be vouchers. You also need supportive services for that exit strategy for some number of households. There also needs to be financial assistance for arrears and a lot of the debts that are preventing people from being able to get into housing in the first place. So that's an exit issue. On the front door, for those who are unsheltered, all right, we need diversion money. That can help a certain number of people who don't really need any supportive services and may need one-time assistance. We also need, okay, we've got families who need some sort of emergency shelter. Well, we know an emergency shelter, building a brand new emergency shelter is incredibly expensive. But we at the lead agency could come back and say, okay, here might be a cost-effective temporary solution for emergency shelter expansion. You know, the most cost-effective is working with our emergency shelter provider to increase capacity, which is something that we at the city are working to do, and working with the county to sort of come back and say, okay, we've got to increase the capacity of our shelter. Families moving forward is busting at the seams 98% of the time, I would say. And when they're not busting at the seams, it's because they're turning over a room or two, waiting for the next referral to come in with repairs and maintenance. So if we can get a little bit of guidance on where you would like us to come back at December with some recommendations, we're happy to pull some data and some possible solutions to be kicked around, because the mayor has asked for some data to be presented as well. And I don't know if increasing capacity means service quality, or the hope would be yes to service quality and experience improvement as well.
I mean, to Sharita, to your question, sorry to just jump back, but again, I'm going to get a t-shirt that says we need a plan. It hurts the agencies that are trying to carry this work out for there not to be a unified plan, because we could go to private funders in some cases and get support for capacity expansion or additional services, because we could say, here's the overall plan. We feel like we're ones that can step up and do this. You follow? But without, it's just us saying we think there's a need sometimes, which we can do and we can do successfully often. But it's a whole nother level when there's actually a plan that we're all activating towards. Sorry, I spoke in front of you.
Go ahead, Drew.
No, that's okay, Russ. I appreciate that point. And to your point too, Colin. So I think this is just what I'm hearing. And we have a joke within our agency that every conversation starts with anecdotally. And it's just like, to your point, like I love this idea of a 2-track plan. And I think, to just echo the theme of this conversation, I hear the need for solutions and deeper funding at every end of the spectrum, right? On the front end and shelter, for back end, and getting people throughout the entire spectrum and journey of homelessness. We need deeper funding and more support, just broadly. I also don't want us to discard all the work we did last month and say that those priorities weren't important and now it's something else. And so, just to bring it back, Colin, to what you're asking for, what I'm hearing in this conversation and what would be helpful to bring back is synthesizing how can we I think at last HSAC meeting it was going to go back through HSAC, where are we with working with this consultant to develop the strategic plan? What is the next step with that? What are the next steps for this next round of RFPs that are going to be the next immediate solutions that are going to be coming out? And how can we, prioritize these 3 to 5 or 3 to 4 areas, whatever it is, and say, this is what we want to focus on in the short to medium term. That's just one thing, again, anecdotally, I say is like, I think if you would ask 3 different agencies what the priorities are, you'd get 3 different answers every single time. And so being able to say like, here's what we decided on would be incredibly helpful. And so again, like I don't want to just throw out all the work we did last month either, and say like that prioritization process wasn't an important conversation that we did sit down and do. So I would say working through that and letting the lead agency lead us, and at the same time, the executive committee or whoever that body is developing that strategic plan alongside a consultant.
Thanks so much, Drew. Anybody else? So are we saying that we don't have an ask at this time, and we would like for community development to go back and give us some data and present us with something in our next meeting for us to be ready to move forward with some requests or suggestions that we recommend?
When do the submissions need to be in for the city or county budgeting process, ideally? I know that runs kind of similar most years. I don't know if it's any different in light of the manager changes this year.
I think the budget process has kind of started already on the city side. I don't know where they are. Samantha, you might be able to chime in on the county side. I know, departmental budget requests have been submitted for like the first round of stuff. I would say we really need to have something ready to go by January at the latest, because it's, still a process to get through. But I would say we really don't want to go past January without something coming to the city at least. And Samantha, if you want to chime in on the county, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact, timelines off the top of my head, but from last year, what Colin's saying about like wanting it being timely to get a request in by January at the latest feels right, but I'll follow up and report back.
Thanks so much, Samantha.
And what is our normal ask? Like, I know that sounds like a really strange question, but like, okay, for fun's sake, if we said we need $200,000 toward a day center, another $200,000 toward street outreach, and we need $800,000 for flexible subsidies and diversion funds, that's 1.2 million. What is that as a percentage versus what we're already asking for?
As a percentage of what?
What are departmental, to use your reference, departmental requests? Because I assume we're not expected to think like HUD money is somehow a departmental.
No. Departmental requests are kind of like, we need an additional full-time employee, or we want XYZ. These are departmental coming out of the general funds above what are normally there. So like dedicated housing fund is an annual allocation that comes specifically to community development through the penny tax or 2 penny tax, whatever it is, that helps to fund this. So you have a rough idea of what that's going to be, but you don't know the final amount of dedicated housing fund. So if we were going to do something like as a department and say, oh, we want $1.2 million to do ABC, and then the department would have to be able to articulate to the city manager that there is no money in the departmental annual allocation to be able to make that happen. So that's what the departmental request would be, is this would be a request from the department. What we're suggesting is what I'm suggesting here is this is an HSAC request through the participatory budgeting process that the city and county have, where HSAC can go and request and advocate for additional resources out of the general budget to be targeted and earmarked for the homeless system. That would be above and beyond the normal allocation. That's what we're talking about. This is just sort of above and beyond. And I don't remember the total dollar amount of dedicated housing fund off the top of my head that's currently in the homeless system. But if you look at the total dollar amount, if you count all of our dollars, federal, state, and local, the homeless system has about $5 million. It's not a whole lot of money. So if you talked 1.2, you're talking about a 20% increase. And that's taking all of the funding sources. That doesn't include, that doesn't include the homeless team salaries in that. That's just money that goes out to support the homeless system. Off the top of my head, it's roughly 5 million.
Yeah.
And is that enough? Clearly it's not, because if it was, we wouldn't be having these kind of discussions. So that's the piece where we come back and say, okay, we as the lead agency can come back and sort of say, okay, based on what we're hearing, here's what we think would work best to meet the immediate needs of unsheltered that could be stood up and implemented quickly. And here is a solution that could be stood up and implemented quickly to help with the exits of people. And we would have to do some sort of data analysis and figure out, okay, is it better to split money between two interventions? Or if we're able to exit people more quickly and sort of do subsidies on the back end, the front end would be able to turn over faster. We wouldn't necessarily need to do as much. So that's the piece. If you put more money in and that's always the big question, chicken and the egg. If we put more money in permanent solutions, are we able to turn over the short-term emergency shelters and street outreach and turn those over faster if we had more exit strategies? But we can do some analysis and come back with some suggestions for December. If that's what the group would like.
All right, group. Need to hear what we would like to happen. Russ, was that a motion?
To just randomly throw out $1.2 million? No. That would
No,
get
not the $1.2 million,
city
but for community development to go back, do some data analysis on things and come back with some recommendations for us for next month. Is that, and if that is the case, then what would that be? What would you like to see?
I mean, I think for us as a group, I'll just share so long ago, here's how my brain works. Long ago, I was in the middle of the Rwandan refugee camps outside Goma, which is then in Zaire. And there were 800,000 refugees, right? Around a town of 5,000. And our little group knew we had resources to do something, but not solve 800,000 people's situations. Know what I mean? And so we tackled housing for, our target was 60 children. We managed to do it for 72. That didn't seem like that wasn't even a drop in the bucket. That probably evaporated before it hit the bottom of the bucket, but it made a difference to those 72. And we just trusted other people were going to work on some of their parts. I feel like if we can identify a couple of very key friction points, like needing subsidies to pay for the units that should be coming available through these new builds, if it's adding capacity for more day shelter type pieces and some diversion, like if we pick 2 or 3 and just part of us is going to have to learn as a system how to focus, because even if we get a plan, we're still going to have to focus even when these big things come. We just can't fix everything. I don't mean that I don't want to. We just got to pick a couple of the biggest friction points. And I know what we've talked about today is a little different than last month, but I do think that exiting piece has come up pretty consistently. And that's part of what I think as a community we hoped would be partially solved with these new units and the bond money going into building units kind of dedicated partially to some of our population. Sorry, that was too long of an answer.
I don't feel like it's very quiet, and we're not this quiet when we're in full HSAC about these issues and matters, which is a little bit disheartening to me. Because my hope is that this is where the work would happen. It does not sound like we're ready to formulate an ask. That's what I feel like I'm hearing right now. Is that accurate?
Sarita, I have a question. Okay. So last month when policy and planning did the poll and we identified the 4 items, the diversion capacity, the increasing emergency shelter beds or maximizing their capacity, the day center services and street outreach. Like, is it the request of this group for the lead agency to come back with numbers around those identified items?
My answer to that would be I don't know. Russ suggested that maybe the agency giving us some guidance, right? And so I was just trying to get out of the group if that's what we wanted to happen, which we could definitely target these 4 groups, right? Or if we wanted to move forward with some asks. I did note, and I'll note again, that diversion has been a very recurrent topic that keeps coming up. And I believe it is essential to us being able to stop the bleed and stop seeing these numbers increase in the way they are, is being able to bail some of these folks out before they hit our system, because we know once they get to our system, we can't serve them. We can't even serve them with a parking lot. Somewhere safe to park the car. And so in my mind, diversion for me, I thought would be the easy one, and maybe we would struggle with other things, but I'm not really getting a lot of feedback from the group about if that's what we want to do. So at this point, I want to have some guidance and some clarity so I know how to advise the team, the community development team, on what policy and planning wants to happen. Does that answer your question, Ricky? Or not really?
I mean, so, it is in my feelings Monday, just letting you know. So I feel like we have a direction. And I feel like the lead agency can move in that direction. I almost feel like we're checking with each other to see, like, is it okay? And I think if you say, if policy and planning says yes, community development lead agency, homeless team, move on these 4 items and bring back to the group what that could look like, then we can do that if that's what you guys want. We are at your behest. We can also research some things, as was mentioned earlier in the conversation about possible other strategies, but we don't want to dishonor what this group decided a month ago. Like, if
Right.
you want us to move on that, then we want to do that for you. I don't want this to be like a circular baton passing.
Right. I just feel like we're in a circle right now.
Strongly, Ricky. Thank you.
I feel like we're in a circle right now, and we did identify these 4 things. So if folks are comfortable with us having community development go back and give us some data specifically around the 4 items we identified in last meeting for discussion in our December meeting. I need a motion that that's what we want, and a second and a vote. Are we ready?
Drew had his hand up. I think he had a question.
He was talking. Or did you had something else to add, Drew?
Yeah, I echo Ricky's sentiment that, yeah, I feel like we've done the work. We just need to move forward. Like, I want to honor that as well. So thank you for saying that, Ricky.
So is that a motion, Drew?
So moved.
All right, I got a motion from Drew for community development to go and give us some data specifically around the 4 items we identified in our last meeting poll. I will entertain a second.
This is Samantha. I don't want to disrail this, but I do just want to highlight, I'm also hearing a lot of exit strategy come up, and that doesn't seem to be in these 4 items we have identified thus far. And before, I just want to ask, do people think that that needs to be added? I'm not trying to give CDD more work, and I'm happy to support in my capacity, but I just have been hearing that a lot throughout this conversation and other conversations, and wanted to ask if the group felt that exit strategy needed to be added to that list of 4.
Can someone, was exit strategies included in the poll that we did last month? I mean, okay, but I'm just curious.
I don't remember. I think it was sort of, we were going based on all the things that everybody had been
mentioning before.
And then when the team, when the homeless team was looking at this, we started realizing that, wait a minute, we can solve for these, because there was a lot of, well, we want to do this for unsheltered, but then we started looking at it as a team and we realized, wait, if we only do this, we're not going to solve the bigger problem that there's nowhere for folks to go. So I think I don't think you can do one without the other, frankly.
And I will just add that our meeting is due to be over in 15 minutes. We do have a 5th item on our agenda, and strategies and exits is like on that list for us to talk about, just so y'all know.
But I think I will jump in and support. I mean, I do think that needs to be added. And I think that while I am all for, like, we said we were going to focus on this at the last meeting, if we're coming back and just saying we've got this one other piece that needs to be added based on what the paid folks figured out, and they bring that back, I think that's a reasonable adjustment. If we're changing it all, then we're back to our normal.
At the beginning, yep.
So if we're only adding one thing to the 4, that's only a 25% increase. Like, that's still improvement for us. All sarcasm aside. So I would support the motion with the amendment that we do add that exit strategy needs to be considered if Drew's amenable to a friendly amendment, I think is the technical term.
Are you amenable, Drew?
I'm amenable.
All right. So we have an amended motion to add exit strategies to the list that was provided from our last meeting. I will entertain a second.
Hey, this is Alicia Thompson. I'll second that motion.
All right, it's been motioned, amended, and seconded. All those in favor, yes. Noes and abstentions have the same right. Motion carries. Thank you guys for that. And I'm glad we were able to get through that and have a plan for our next meeting. The last item on our agenda is discussion about the housing bond units, and this is a follow-up conversation to the conversation we had in the HSAC meeting on October the 26th, I think. No, not the 26th, October the 23rd, 30th, maybe one of those days. And I promised that we would discuss the housing bond units and any things people wanted to discuss around those things. But I will just say that I did kind of categorize some of the things that I was hearing into like 3 subsets. One was logistics. So especially as Colin was talking about, like the process of how the name changes and stuff gets lost. And so there were some concerns about that and us not, necessarily getting access to the units. We talked about some lost opportunities. And so the second group was like recouping lost opportunities. Is there availability for us to be able to do that? And then if so, like, what does that look like for us to recoup lost opportunities? And then lastly, strategies. And under there, I have exits, move-ons, graduations, from like PSH projects to a more or less intensive, for lack of a better word, kind of housing supportive landscape. So, I mean, that's kind of where I group things. I don't know if that's what everyone else was thinking. I would also like any kind of updates that maybe community development has on any of the units that they spoke on. I think I made that ask, and I know at least one property came online because I found it by accident, and they actually have their applications out. So, and I think, I don't know if I shared it with Colin, but I did get that information as well. So, let's try to do some due diligence to these 12 minutes in picking back up on our discussion about the housing bond units. The floor is open. We don't have any additional questions or outstanding staff. Do you have anything you want to add?
I don't have anything else to add at this point. We're working through a few things. Russ, I need to get with you on a couple things.
Um,
I'll just add, I checked for, this is an ancillary piece, maybe. I do think we should have some presence with the affordable, I think the HSAC or the homeless service working community, so to speak, should have some presence on that affordable housing bond oversight group, or at least somebody there kind of watching the meetings and asking some of these questions.
questions.
I did look, the current openings, I think, are both for like DHA reps, like people who live in DHA properties, but we may want to continue to watch that, or maybe Citizens Advisory Board, just to kind of keep an eye on this a little bit going forward.
I agree with
I'll
that.
flag
And
it if I see openings.
once upon a time, there was somebody who was connected to the HSAC that was on that, who had been selected to be on that group, and that person is no longer a part of HSAC, and that's Angel Vic Lewis.
Got it.
And so she was kind of like keeping me abreast, and I actually attended a few of the meetings, but if you're not a member, you can't talk. And I quickly stopped watching because it was super organized. It was a lot of talking to people, and it was not a lot of room for questions. But I do agree that there needs to be some presence from somebody on that committee, just to make sure, in the spirit to make sure we're aware of what's happening, what's going on, so we know. I did include in the chat Cedar Trace, Colin. So their application is out. Excel Properties is the property manager. And I don't know did we have a dedicated commitment to those units?
I would say go ahead and apply, and if we do, we'll work it that way, but it doesn't hurt to try both directions. So I would say apply if you have an opportunity.
And they have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartment homes. Just so you know, it's on Carr Road. So their application for it is over. And I just, a friend of mine was riding by and sent me a picture and said, "Hey, Sharita, do you know about this place?" And that's how I found out. So I just wanted to share that information. But I feel like, why did we not know? And I think that's a big one. And then I thought maybe our group would want to discuss logistics. How can we, and I think it was Anthony, you talked about something about what you guys were doing at community development to kind of try to track this a little bit better. But us being able to lend our voice to the logistics of such housing bonds, and the aftermath, and how if we are, if there's a dedication for units, making sure that the communication is open in a timely way where our folks can actually take advantage of it, especially with our 50 families just sitting there not having anywhere to go and new units coming online.
That's what we're working with the compliance team and the multifamily team to get a better handle on when the transfer is made from construction to property management. That's the piece where things have gotten broken down. So we're in the process of cleaning that up to get clear on who's taking what and who's working on tenant selection plans so that we can try and be part of that tenant selection plan criteria. And that's what I think Russ is working on with Hardy Street that will be part of that conversation. But I don't think Hardy Street is that the name of the units, Russ, or is it going to change to be like the wonderful apartments at Hardy Street or
No, I
something?
mean I don't think that maybe a couple times there's been name changes. I mean the addresses never change.
Right, the addresses don't
They
change.
can't move the properties, so maybe we track it by the general address, but no, Hardy Street's Hardy Street.
So those are some things that we're in the process of working through. In terms of Cedar Trace, I'm not aware of any connections at this point, so I would say apply. And if we're able to tie something together, then we'll just be able to expedite or try and push on that. But I would say go ahead and if you have an opportunity, go get it in there.
And then Colin, what about maybe units where there was dedicated verbiage in the agreement, but maybe it's leased up already, and about our ability to recoup access?
I don't have an answer for that yet. That's a compliance piece that has to be sorted out.
Is that on your compliance question list?
Yeah, that's one of the things that they're digging through of trying to figure out where are their compliance. Looking at the contracts may say one thing, the tenant selection plan may say another thing. A tenant selection plan may say, we'll work with the Continuum of Care or Alliance or Housing for New Hope or Urban Ministries or Families Move. It may list off 17 different things. And the contract may say, we'll follow tenant selection plan. So if they follow the tenant selection plan and they take referrals from any of the groups that they say this or this or this, and they did do that, then they're in compliance. There would have to be something specific in there saying, will take or X number of units will be dedicated to people exiting homelessness. So that's the piece that we're trying to go through and truing up all the different pieces.
Any other questions from anyone from anyone else?
I have a question, Rita.
Yes, Rick.
So I think that's awesome information you were able to get from boots on the ground about Cedar Trace. I guess my question, Colin, is that something that we could share through opening doors, just letting the community know, hey, if you are, working with someone who needs housing, this place is open. Like, is that one way that we could get the message out?
Yes, if we have the contact information, I'll have to look and see if we'll have to get that information. We can send it out to the full COC.
Awesome.
It may help in your planning if we start talking about flexible subsidies. Those RFP responses should have the number of units at each size and the monthly rent amounts. Because for the most part, those monthly rent amounts are locked in at the time of the proposal. They may be renegotiated based on some of the gap funding issues over the last couple of years, but that could be, so we might know, I think one of the ones that Hardy Street was like $650 a month or something. Let's say at 700. Well, we know if it's 700 times 12, then that houses somebody for a year kind of thing. That may help our argument if we can get that data for ones we think are coming on in the next year.
There was a question in the chat from Ms. Colleen. I think she's already off, but she asked if we could add two data points to our monthly data that we receive, I guess from Nicole Lamb is what she was asking for. Youth and veterans. Are those questions that we already asked? Colin, do you know?
On youth, that would I'd have to talk to Nicole. We might be able to pull that easily. Let me on the unsheltered calls. I think that's what she's talking about is being able to report that on the unsheltered. I'll have to ask Nicole if that's easy for her to pull.
Well, it looks like we have 3 minutes left. Does anybody have anything that they want to share? Is there anything other than the 5-item request that we've asked of community development and our unsheltered number update and approval of all those minutes next month? Is there anything else you guys would like to see follow up on? Is Lead ready to make an update? And Drew, do you have any updates from the ad hoc group we started, the unsheltered response group? Anything you want to have included on the agenda for next month?
I'll reach out to you ahead of time for you.
All right, sounds good. If everybody is good today, I will entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting. I thank you. I thank you first of all for your presence. I will definitely encourage folks to share their opinions, their voices, even if you feel like it's something people don't want to hear. I think it's the things that we need to talk about so we can get through it and get to the other side. But I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion. Can I get a second?
This is Samantha. I'll second that motion.
Been moved and seconded, and I'm sure all are in agreement with adjourning our meeting, and we will talk again on next month. Thank you so much.